Hey there gang, I'm here again with my friend Nico, and we want to talk to you about deepening the engagement in your in-hand positions in this beginning in-hand work and accessing more the thoracic sling, opening your horse's shoulders. So this comes into what you may have, if you've taken a clinic with me before, you may have heard me refer to this as position 2, the way that it was taught to me by some of my teachers. The initial work that we did was a position 1, and this work's going into a position 2, which will eventually become a counter shoulder in. Okay, so this position can be a little bit tricky because our horse has to soften their back and coil a little bit more with the haunches in order to come into this movement. It can also be really helpful for them to find their balance, transitioning in and out from that position 1 feel into this position 2 feel. So that's something that you want to work on and always be flexible that you're going to be going back and forth with this. You wouldn't just stick with one thing the whole time, because that can kind of become drilling, right? And we don't ever really want to do that with our horses. So we're going to start out by going through all of the pieces that we've already done. Our releasing the pole, our rock back or rein back, and our position 1 mindfully, and then we move into this helping our horse find more of a sit behind and a coil behind, and then opening their shoulders. If we think back to what we were doing in the initiating movement piece, I was walking backwards on a small circle. My horse's shoulders were around me on a larger circle, and their haunches were around me on the largest circle. We could say if this was a wheel, a bicycle wheel or something, I would be more or less the center hub of that wheel, right? And my horse's body, the aim is that he's a spoke, right? We might say that his tail is the tread on that tire, okay? When we change, we're alternating so that then I become the outer side of the circle. My horse's tail comes more to the inside of the circle, all right? I'll show this to you, and then I'll break it down and talk you through it a little bit more. So I'm going to start in this idea of that position 1, initiating that mindful movement, okay? I'm walking backwards on a small circle. It's a circle to the right. The bend is to the right. When I change, the bend is still to the right, but now the circle is to the left. And now I come back into that first position. So you'll see that in this first position, again, coming here at a little bit more of a distance from the camera, right circle, right bend, and then right bend, but a left circle. And you notice I keep my position in front of Nico here, and I have to get a little bit bigger in my steps. You see now his body is rotating around his tail, so to speak, okay? Here in this first position, we'd say his tail is rotating around his body, right? And now in this second position, we'd say his body is rotating around his nose. I'll go back into this. I'm going to try to add all these pieces so that you can see them and really start to notice. In the first position we talked about, inside hind, tracking toward outside front. As we go into this, it is still inside hind, tracking toward outside front. When I begin with here, I'm in front of my horse. I think about my arm almost being an extension of his spine all the way to my shoulder. When I come into this second position, it's the same idea. My arm is still in front, and I'm still in front, and now I'm stepping larger around him. Good job. So in that work, he has to sit back a little bit more. He has to carry a little bit more weight on his shoulders, or on his haunches, and you see that the shoulders begin to open and step a little wider, okay? This becomes our counter shoulder in if we're on a larger circle or we're going down the track or something like that. It really encourages, again, the softening of the low back and the loading of the haunches, all right? a couple of the mistakes that happen with riders when we go into this position 2. And don't be worried if you struggle with it, because based on brace, stiffness, weakness that many horses have, this can be a tricky position. It can be a tricky movement for your horse. When we go into that movement, a couple things that riders make as mistakes pretty frequently. The top 2 that we can always count on. Number 1, they deviate from their position here in front and they end up coming around to the side. Eventually we'll be to the side, but to start with, we want to stay in front of our horse's nose. The second big mistake that everybody tends to make is that they want to see that their horse is doing the right thing, so they turn to look at him. In that movement, turning into your horse and looking at him, the intention and the angle of your torso blocks the horse's shoulders. So you'll notice a few times as I was going around there, I was in front of Nico and aiming myself straight for the camera. Think about the circle that you want to be on, stay in front of your horse and try to walk on that circle, almost as though they're an afterthought in that moment. Of course, they're not the afterthought, they're the primary thought, but you want to really feel you're guiding them onto the circle that you're aiming for, rather than trying to manipulate their positioning or their movement and getting stuck into just the following of their movement in that case. Guide them where you want them to go. Another tip that I think is really important is that when you go into that position, think about it as if you were part of a parade going down the street, right? Soldiers marching in a parade, or you know, some sort of holiday parade going down the street. If you're keeping in time and you're keeping in tempo, but you're on the inside of a corner, say the parade's going around a corner, keeping in tempo, the people on the inside of the corner are going to be staying in tempo but taking smaller steps, where the people on the outside of the corner are going to be keeping in tempo but taking larger steps. It's very much the same here as we're changing positions. If I want to be on the outside of that circle, say for this position 2, and I go faster, I'm increasing my energy, and so my horse is going to respond in kind and increase their energy, and oftentimes that's just going to wind us up in a tangled mess. So I want to think about, as we're doing this, when I'm going through that basic first position of movement, I want to think about my tempo, okay? And I want to try to maintain that tempo as I change position. So if I were to just think about my feet here, I'm stepping 1, 2, 1, 2. Go to the second position and 1, 2. But it's bigger steps, and 1, 2, and then coming back to the first, and 1, 2. So the tempo is going to be really important also. Again, here the idea of me staying straight with my horse, our position 1, staying ahead of the horse and focusing on the camera, moving around my horse and guiding for that position 2. So in that first position, the haunches rotate around the nose. In the second position, the nose rotates around the haunches. First position unlocks the top line and gently starts to introduce the idea of engagement with the inside hind leg. That second position opens the shoulders and encourages even more loading onto the haunches. I hope that's helpful. I hope that's easy enough for you to see, although it might not necessarily be easy to accomplish with your horse. Don't forget always finding the halt, the rein back, the half halts that you need. Make sure that you've got those going there, and play flowing in and out from position 1 to position 2 to find that relaxation in the top line, the understanding in your horse, and that engagement for your horse. Now we're going to go visit with Tyler and one of her horses and see what she's got going on. Alright, so we've got Tyler and her pony Gia here, and we're going to be talking about deepening the engagement, unlocking the thoracic sling, so giving us better access to the shoulders, otherwise known here as what we're doing in position 2. So, Tyler, whenever you're ready, oh, hi sweetie, whenever you're ready, we'll start as always first with the unlock the pole, rock back or rein back, and then we start with that position 1. When that feels good, then we flow into the position 2. Okay, now go ahead and halt right there. You see how starting in position 1, her feet weren't quite organized, and so she left first with the inside front leg. And this is something I'm really glad this happened, because it's helpful for everybody to see. If they're not organized properly to begin with, it's easy for them to start out of balance. So she actually initiated the movement with the outside hind and the inside front. And ideally, in position 1, we'd be initiating with inside hind, outside front. So here the way she's standing is a little better organized, right? For that inside hind to step through first. Yeah, that's totally fine right there. Very good. Good. Really nice. And start to draw your a little more simply because of space in the arena. You're going to aim more for me here with your shoulders, with your back. And now when that feels good, you're going to roll yourself into position 2. So yeah. So Tyler's going to be looking out ahead, staying out ahead of the nose a little bit more there. Yeah, see, it's easy to get sucked into the pocket there of the All right, so we just had to do a little battery change on our microphones here. But, so Tyler, whenever you're ready, we'll continue into that position 1, and we'll turn it into position 2. And then in the position 2, make sure that we stay in front of her nose with your body. You're going to aim your torso for the circle you're headed on. That's fantastic right there. Good. And a little bit bigger in your steps. Not faster, but bigger. Yeah, there we go. And we see the articulation around on the circle, and now back in position 1. Really good. So it can be a little tricky sometimes when we transition into position 2 because of again, the balance and the size of the circle. I joke that most horses need a 30-acre meadow to make a full circle in position 2 the first few times that you ask for it. Really nice there, Tyler. And then rocking back into position 1 again. What you'll start to find is that when position 1 is really good, in other words, when the horse is really soft and reaching through the top line, really loosening in the low back, position 2 is easy. When position 2 works well, you'll find that they're more relaxed when you return back to position 1. Super, Tyler. Nice. And then rocking back into position 1. Good. Just be careful that you don't get stuck looking at her in position 2. Okay? We'll have you change sides whenever you're ready, and we'll do a little bit on the other side as well. If your horses at home are struggling with the position 2, one of the things that I really like to do is flirt with position 2 rather than commit to it. So Tyler, the first thing I'll have you do this time is we're going to go into 1 and then flirt with 2 and return to 1. And so Tyler can show you how to, I think we've done this before. I hope so, now that I've introduced it this way. But what we'll do is just get ready for position 2 and then return to position 1. Similar to how we were just initiating movement to begin with. Good. So think slow in your feet there. There you go. You feel her start to roll the hip around. And now think about position 2, turn your torso. Good. And now say, just kidding, back to 1. So you see how we start to change position, and that'll help Gia to load the haunches a little more. But then before she loses confidence, we go back to position 1. Before she says, oh, this is really hard, we say, oh, and just kidding, we'll go back to the easy part. There you go. And then back to 1. Good. And so now think about your tempo in your feet. You're going to go bigger strides. Let's see how far you can reach in your legs when you go to position 2. And we're still just kind of flirting with it. There you go. And then back to 1. There's a moment when we get a little distracted. She's looking at horses in the paddock outside the arena here. Yeah. So we just say, can you soften in your pole? Can you return back to me? Good. And now we go from 1 to 2. There. And back to 1. So it doesn't have to be a lot of steps. Think about it this time, Tyler. Really flirt with it. Just change your position and then return right away back to 1. There. Right away. But yeah, very good. And so you'll start to see that that'll create a rocking in the body. If a horse is unconfident or really disorganized, this can help them find confidence and organization as we introduce this idea. Good. And then we'll see if we can go for maybe a half circle, Tyler, in position 2. Good job preparing. And just before we go, think about touching toward the hind leg with your stick to say, by the way, keep that stepping under, looking ahead on your circle. There you go. See how easy it is to get sucked into that thought of, I want to look at my horse and see that they're doing the right thing. Good. Yes, there you go. Good. And now, Tyler, go ahead and for a halt. We'll give Gia a moment to feel pretty successful right there. And for the sake of everybody learning at home, we're going to go through a couple of mistakes that we'll make so that they can see how it affects their horse when they do this. So I'll have you start in position 1, and then I'm just going to talk you through a couple of the mistakes. All right, great. So Tyler, this time, for the sake of everybody learning at home, so that they can see what they're probably likely to do a few times, and we all make these mistakes whenever we're first learning it. I figure I do it better now because I made so many of the mistakes, and we all continue to, and we catch ourselves with these, right? Because the horse is born knowing how to be a horse, but the rider's not born knowing how to be a rider. So mistakes are part of what happens. But I want to have folks see a little bit how these mistakes will affect their horse, so that if they run into challenges with their horse, they can check themselves and say, maybe I'm making these mistakes. So whenever you're ready, Tyler, we're going to roll into position 1. And the first thing I'm going to have you do, when you go into position 2, let yourself get stuck back in her neck. So kind of roll in too soon to that pocket of her shoulder. Yeah, and we see that's exactly what'll happen. Good job. And then back to position 1. So you see how Gia got jammed up in the shoulder and started going backwards. That's a really common thing in position 2. Now another thing that we'll see happen is the riders will push the nose with their hand to try to push the horse into position 2 rather than guiding with their torso. So go ahead and show what that looks like. Yeah, and so you see how we lose the bend in the body. Gia's like, why are we doing this? This is wrong. She's such a good soul for this. Really good. And then another mistake that riders will make is that they get to looking too much at their horse's feet when they transition to position 2. So here she's looking too much, and you see how that kind of jams the movement of the shoulder. She's still stepping, and now she's going backwards. But even with the stepping that she was doing, she was jammed up in the front end. And so now we're going to apologize to Gia by doing it right. Good. Whenever you're ready, flow into position 2, looking ahead on your circle. Good. And guide her where you want to go. Super smooth and fluid. That's fantastic. And this just goes to show us how much, even if the horse is not doing it right, it's not always because they don't understand. Sometimes it's because we're just in the wrong position and asking the wrong way. So I think it's really great and generous of Gia to show us a few of the mistakes here, and to show us also how easy it is, even if one has made a few mistakes, that we can adjust things just by adjusting ourselves. So thank you so much, Tyler and Gia, for that. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody at home, starting to apply this work with your horses. Hopefully it's helpful, and I hope that you and your horse are enjoying your journey together.